Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to work on a little bit of Mendelian genetics and also Punnett squares. What's interesting about this lesson is one that basically many of you have probably heard of from high school, but if you haven't, you've potentially heard about it but don't really know how to work it out. And so what we're going to actually do today is learn how inheritance works. And so what that means is why you are the way you are. So let me just kind of give you a brief overview. There was this guy named Gregor Mendel, and Gregor Mendel was a monk who lived many years ago. And what he basically did was he devoted his entire life to taking these little pea plants, which had different colored flowers, and they bred different ways. And he put them together and tried different experiments, pollinated them different ways. And basically what he ended up getting was a wide array of differences in the offspring based upon what he mated in the parents. And so what he ultimately came up to be was who we would call the father of genetics. So he initially determined how we come up with these kind of genetic details and ultimately how we become who we are today. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a few scientific details today. And the first one is going to be the understanding that there are 46 chromosomes in the human body. Now, I've mentioned this to you already. So if we take this 46 overall, this 46 is how many you have. And these 46 chromosomes carry all sorts of information like why your hair color is the way it is, why your eyes are the color the way they are, why your metabolism works the way it is, why you have certain traits, etc. So all these things are carried on what we would call chromosomes. And these chromosomes came to you by your parents. So guess what? 23 of them came from mom and 23 of them came from dad. So you are, in essence, half of mom and half of dad. Now, that's a really cool thing to learn, because what that means is whoever you end up potentially mating with, your children then will be half of you and half of your then spouse. And so what we determine by this information is a set of details that we would say are alleles. And these alleles are on chromosomes. So if we were to draw those chromosomes, remember those chromosomes we talked about a little bit detail ago, and I said you have these sister chromatids, and each of these guys is a sister. Well, there's little taglines on these chromosomes, and those little taglines are called alleles, and the alleles themselves depend or code for certain things. So you have one allele that will code for hair color, and one that will code for height, and one that will code for metabolism, one that will code for skin color, all the way down the line. And so these little alleles are what we're going to actually talk about today. So let's erase this off. I'm going to give you some more details on that. Now, when we look at some terms, I want you to write down somewhere. We're going to first use the word homozygous. We're going to compare that to the word heterozygous. Now, homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous is going to mean same. So in this case, these guys are the same allele. Zygous means a continuation or a putting together of DNA. So I always say homozygous means same. So let me give you an example of what those would look like. Let's just say it's big A, or little a, little a. Those are homozygous alleles, meaning that they're both the same. You have one big letter, another big letter. Those are both the same. Those are homozygous letters. Little a, those are also homozygous. Now, heterozygous, hetero means different. Zygous means still continuation or putting together of DNA. In this case, I would have one of each because these are different. I have a big and I have a little. That is going to be a heterozygous individual. And so when you look at these allele types, I'm going to give you an assignment. You're going to have to work through these terms for me. Another set of terms you're going to want to write down is going to be dominant and recessive. Now, if you are a dominant allele, you mask. You're the big daddy. You're the guy who matters the most. So a dominant allele will overcome what we would call a recessive one. A recessive one is kind of like the weakling in my mind, if you want to think of it that way. So let's go back to this example. You see the big A there? The big A in this example would be a dominant allele. The little a, these guys are going to be recessive alleles. In most instances with genetics, the dominant one is always going to be a capital, and the recessive was always going to be a little letter. Okay, so that's how you're going to kind of keep that straight. So if I give you this term on the set of questions, I'm going to say you are a homozygous recessive individual. What does that mean about you? Well, homozygous means you're the same, and if you're recessive, what kind of letters do you have? You have little letters. So if you are homozygous recessive, you are little a, little a. okay, or any other letter you want to make it. If you are homozygous dominant, that means you are big A, because remember, big A's are dominant alleles, or a big A of little, any capital letter is going to be a dominant allele. If you're heterozygous, you're always going to be there, big A, little a. So let's go through one more set of terms, and then we'll do some examples today. The next thing I want to talk about is the idea of genotype versus phenotype. And a genotype is the letter. So when I gave you a minute ago, I said big A and big A, that's going to be a genotype. Those are my genes. My little a is also a genotype. Now, if I give you this term and I say, hey guys, a big A, if you have a big A letter, that means you have dark hair. If you are a little letter, you have light hair. What this means then is that my genotype is just looking at my letters, but if I have a big A, what color of hair do I have? Well, remember, big A stands for dark hair, okay? So big A is always going to be dominant. So in this case, this big A guy has dark hair. Now, if I have the genotype, which means letters, okay, little A's are going to be light hair. Okay, so those are going to be, the genotype is little a, and the phenotype is light hair. So that's the physical characteristics. So there's two terms you're going to look at as well. When I use the word genotype, that means the letters. What do my genes actually say? When I use the word phenotype with a PH, that's spelled like this. Phenotype means, what are my physical characteristics? What color of hair do I have? How tall am I? What do I look like? Okay, those are physical characteristics in this case. The other question you may have is, well, what about that whole heterozygous situation? Well, let's do that. If you are big A, little a, that's the genotype that you have. You are heterozygous in this instance. What color of hair would you have? Think about that for a second. Well, the color of hair you have, remember, is dependent on whether your alleles are recessive or dominant. You have a big A, so what color of hair do you have? Dark hair. Good. So you find here instantly that this guy has a dark hair as my phenotype and a big A, little a as my genotype. So we're going to go through a lot of those different terms today as you begin to look at your assignments. And I'm going to go through just a couple of examples, nothing too tricky, with something called Punnet squares. Now, there's a pretty good chance that most of you have heard what a Punnet square is. A Punnet square is kind of like a fancy math problem that involves science, and I've always loved Punnet squares. Not everybody loves them. I think it's the nerd in me, but when you look at a Punnet square, the best examples I could give you are just simple ones like we just did. So let's just say this. Let's just say you have, let's just use hair color again because that's an easy example. So if you are big A, you have red hair. If you are little a, you have black hair. And I tell you that you have two parents, because remember, you get half of your DNA from both of your parents, so your parents are both going to have a set of alleles. And I tell you that mom is going to have black hair. So we know that she has black hair. And dad is going to have, in this case, he's going to be heterozygous for red hair. So heterozygous means I have a big and a little letter. So in this case, he's red, but he's a heterozygous. Okay, so that means that mom, because she's black hair, has to be little a, and dad, because he's heterozygous for red, is going to be big A, little a. What I'm going to do then is create a Punnet square. It looks something like this. Little 4 boxes there. And I'm going to put mom's alleles up top, because that's what I always do. It makes it easy. Put the 2 little a's, because we know that's what mom is, up at the top. And you put dad over here on the side, and we said dad was heterozygous, and he's going to be big A, little a for red hair. All you do at that point is just carry the alleles over. So in this case, I have a big A and a little a in this box. And in this box, I have a big A and a little a. In this box, I have a little a, and in this box, I have a little a, little a. Now, you just did a Punnet square, okay, for the offspring of these two parents. So you could then tell me, if you have two people that are kind of in this situation, what do their offspring look like? What do their kids look like? What are the chances they're going to have a baby with red hair? What are the chances they're going to have a baby with black hair, etc.? Now, when I look at this, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, okay? I'm going to ask you, what is the genotypic ratio that you get, meaning what are the results with the genotypes? And then I'm going to ask you, what are the phenotypic ratios that you get? So we know that capital A means red hair, and we know that little a means black hair. And remember, red hair always masks. It's dominant. It has that capital letter. So in this case, if I look at my genotypic ratio of my children, I'm going to have 2 of them that could be big A, little a, and I'm going to have two of them that are going to be little a, little a. That is my genotypic ratio. Okay, that's the genes. That's what I could get with the genetics. However, then I have to look at my phenotypic ratio. Well, phenotypically, what am I if I have a big A? I have red hair. So in this case, I have 2 red-haired kids that I could get, and I also have 2 black-haired kids that I could get. Okay, so this is my answer. This is my genotypic ratio to my phenotypic ratio. So when you look at these, that's all we're going to be talking about is, do I understand how to create a problem and answer those questions based upon it? Let's go ahead and do one more Punnett square, and then I'll set you guys free to work on these on your own. Let's do height in this case. So let's use a different letter because I'm tired of using A's. Let's use B's. I don't know, that seems the next simplest. All right, so big B means you're tall, and a little b means you're short in this case. Okay, so I've got this gigantic father. Okay, dad is really, really tall. Dad, we're going to say, is homozygous dominant for tallness. Now, if he's homozygous dominant for tallness, homozygous means same letters, dominant means big letters. So in this case, he has to be big B, big B. This is going to be dad. Mom, we're going to say, is homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive for shortness. So, okay, so if mom is homozygous recessive for shortness, she's going to have 2 little b's. So this is going to be mom. Now, as I cross these out, okay, I've got a really tall dad having a baby with a little short mom, okay? In this instance, I'm going to have a big B up here, a little b over here, and I'm going to cross these out. So these 2 give me a big B, little b. These guys give me a big B, little b. This guy gives me a big B, little b. This one gives me a big B, little b. Now, this is an interesting example because look, all my offspring are the same, okay? So if I take this instance, what occurs here is 100% of the time, so 4 of my offspring are going to be genetically big B, little b. What does that look like phenotypically? That means 4 of my children are which height? Are they tall or are they short? Well, they have that big letter there, okay? So that means that's dominant. So in this case, they're going to be all tall children. So all the kids are going to take after dad. In this case, they're all going to be tall by the sake of genetics there for carrying after dad. So this is how a Punnett square works. I'm going to give you a number of examples on the assignment today. All you're going to do is look at them. In fact, in most of them, I give you the letters. The only other thing I could have you somewhat look at is there's a chance I'm going to give you the children. Okay, and if I give you the kids, I may not tell you over here, okay, what mom and dad fully are. And that's where you may have to work backwards. There's a couple of examples where I tell you, please work backwards in this case. Make yourself a Punnett square. Fill in what I tell you the kids are, okay, and then work backwards. What do my parents have to be if my kids are this genotype or this phenotype, okay? And so work that out. If you have any questions, please let me know. Make sure you take notes on what these terms mean: homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive. Okay, anytime you're dominant, you have a big letter. Anytime you're recessive, you have a little letter. And anytime you see that word homozygous, that means same. So if it's homozygous dominant, two big letters. Homozygous recessive, 2 little letters. And then heterozygous, meaning I have 1 of each. I got a big and a little. Okay, wish you guys all the best. And hey, spring break's next week. So after this, we'll take a week off, and then we'll kick back up when it's over. So have a great night.